Hi, this is Alex from devstories.eu. Terraform Fundamentals, Episode 8 of 13. Your cloud infrastructure finishes deploying perfectly, but you still have one major problem. You need to know its public IP address to actually connect to it. Combing through cloud provider dashboards defeats the purpose of automation. You need a way to extract that specific piece of data directly from Terraform. That is where exposing data with output values comes in. Output values are essentially the return values of a Terraform configuration. When you define and create a resource, the cloud provider generates certain attributes dynamically. These are things you cannot know before the deployment, like an assigned IP address, a generated database password, or a specific domain name. You use output blocks to capture those dynamically generated attributes and expose them to the outside world. To define one, you write an output block followed by a label. This label is just the name you want to assign to the output. Inside the block, you define a single required argument called value. This argument points to the specific piece of data you want to extract. For example, if you create a virtual machine, you might set the value argument to point directly to the public IP attribute of that specific machine resource. Take a concrete scenario. You have an automated pipeline that deploys a new Azure Kubernetes cluster. When the deployment finishes, your developers need the auto-generated raw Kubernetes endpoint to configure their local connection tools. Without an output, someone would have to log into the cloud portal, find the cluster, and copy the URL manually. Instead, you write an output block named cluster endpoint. You set its value to reference the fully qualified domain name attribute of the newly built Kubernetes cluster. When Terraform finishes applying your configuration, it gathers all defined output values and prints them directly to the command line interface. Your automation pipeline can then read that text and pass the endpoint straight to the developers. You can also retrieve these values later without running a new deployment. You simply run the Terraform output command in your terminal. For automation scripts, you can even tell that command to return the data as raw text or in JSON format, making it easy for other software tools to parse. Sometimes the data you need to output is confidential, like a database password or a private key. You do not want those strings scrolling across a shared terminal screen or sitting permanently in your continuous integration build logs. To prevent this, you add the sensitive argument inside the output block and set it to true. Terraform will then hide the actual value in the console display, replacing it with a placeholder tag indicating the value is sensitive. Here's the key insight. Setting an output to sensitive only suppresses it from the terminal display. It does not encrypt or hide the data inside the Terraform state file. The password or key is still stored in plain text within your state data on disk or in your remote backend. The sensitive flag is purely a display filter for the command line interface, not a security mechanism for your storage. Output values ultimately act as your configuration API. They are the structured, predictable way you hand critical information back to humans or automation tools the moment a run completes. That's all for this one. Thanks for listening and keep building.